Hello and welcome to FPL Mate, your best mate for fantasy Premier League content for the 2021-22 season. My name is Dan and today I am making a video all about structuring your team, and whether you are new at the game, you want a little bit of help starting out making your first fantasy team, or maybe you know what you're doing but you just want a little bit of guidance on how to best structure your team. What I've got for you today is a really nice 3-4-3 formation team structure that you can work with, play around with, mess about with, have a little bit of fun with, and it's going to be really useful, really flexible, and it's just going to guarantee that you have a really good start in FPL because you just have that flexibility. Even if things do go wrong, you have enough flexibility to move around and bring in the players that start to look really good. So if you do enjoy this video, please do leave a like, massively helps the channel, and of course subscribe if you are new around here, because I know a lot of you guys watching this video right now are not subscribed, so please do join us, and you know, we're going to have FPL content pretty much every single day. But without further ado, let's come and have a look at how this team structure is going to work. So, as you guys well know, you start off with a budget of 100 million. Now, I know it sounds like, okay, yeah, we've got 100 million to play around with, but realistically, that's not really the case now, is it? So, there are, first of all, a few players which I think should go in every single team. So, before we start messing around with some of the other players, we do need to think about the most crucial players that we are going to put in. So, first of all, Mo Salah, he goes in your team straight away. And guys, captain him as well. Don't mess about with this one. It's a really easy decision. Liverpool have some great fixtures to start off the season with, starting with Norwich. Salah is going to be the most popular player in the entire game, who's going to be so crucial for you guys to have in your teams. And if you don't have Salah, you're really going to suffer if he scores a couple of goals. So don't make the mistake a lot of people made last year when Salah scored a few goals right off the back in game week 1. Don't make the same mistake as last year. Let's play it nice and safe. Let's be sensible, and let's put Salah in our game week 1 teams. So with that said, we've got a little bit less budget already, so we do need to add a couple more players who I do think are essential must-have players. So we're going to put Trent Alexander-Arnold in. I think the main reason why you would have to go for Trent Alexander-Arnold in is because if you don't have him, it's very hard to actually bring him in after the fact because of his price at 7.5 million. He's the only defender at that price. It's really hard to actually make the transfers to get him in after that. So you can always take him out if you don't really fancy him later, but I would have to say that Trent Alexander-Arnold is probably one of those players, along with Salah, that you can just keep in your team pretty much the entire season. So that's going to be really nice. So definitely would recommend having Trent Alexander-Arnold in, just because of these clean sheets that Liverpool can potentially get with all these defenders that they've got back. Liverpool have arguably the best, or at least one of the best defensive fixtures to start off the season of any team in the Premier League. So there's going to be assists, there's going to be free kicks taken, there's going to be shots taken from Trent Alexander-Arnold, there's going to be clean sheets, nice and easy. Put him in your team, and we're going to finish you off with one more who I would call essential player, and it's another fairly boring defender, I guess, and that is Luke Shaw. Again, Manchester United have a fabulous run of opening fixtures. Luke Shaw is going to be that nailed on left back. He is almost as creative as Trent Alexander-Arnold. We can see that Manchester United are boosting their defensive credentials with Varane coming in, so that's going to be really nice for them. So we're going to get a few clean sheets from Shaw, and we're also going to get some nice, a couple of odd assists, maybe the odd goal as well. You know, we know what happened in the Euros final, don't we? So you never know with things like that. So with that done, we now have a few players in our team. We're already started, but there is a little bit more that we absolutely have to do. And I say absolutely have to do, but this is what I strongly recommend. And this is basically having a very weak bench. Having a weak bench isn't necessarily like having a weak bench, but what we really want to do at the start of the season, because we do have that limited budget, we want to put all of our money on the pitch, or at least most of our money on the pitch. So whilst it's important to have players who will actually play on your bench, they are really just there as the backup brigade, and the players on the pitch are going to be the main players who are playing every single game week. And if they're not playing, if you don't want to play them 1 week, then that's probably a good sign to transfer them out rather than rotate with your bench. Rotating with your bench, not really a good idea when we are working with this budget. So on the bench, we're going to have a 4 million goalkeeper. We don't want to rotate goalkeepers. There's no point in doing that. We want a 4.5 million defender. So just slightly more expensive than the cheaper defenders. So that is going to be a nice playing player. Well, there's loads of options that you can go for there. Ben White, Luke Ayling, Ryan Ait-Nouri. We can talk more and more. Lamptey, not Lamptey anymore, but Veltman maybe you go for that 4.5 million defender. So you've actually got a decent option there, at least in the backup brigade. But other than that, you're not really going to need the second and third outfield bench options very often. So we can just go for a 4.5 million midfielder and a 4 million defender. The 4 million defender in particular, it really is not going to matter. There's not really going to be a time where you actually use your 4 million defender, to be fair, so don't worry too much about that. For a 4.5 million midfielder, though, try and be fairly sensible. Pick a player who is going to play regularly, even if they just get 2 points every single week. It is nice to have that 2 point as backup, but I really doubt you will need this player very often. The 4.5 million defender might be a little bit more useful. So, with those players now all on there, we don't have a budget of 100 million anymore. Our budget is now 55.5 million, and this is where we have a little bit of money to play around with and see what we can deal with. So what we're going to do, well, let's start off in goal, and here we have, I've put like a placeholder goalkeeper on the pitch for you there. We want a goalkeeper between the prices of 4.5 million and 5.5 million. I really would not go any further than 5.5 million. There really is no point. The 6 million goalkeepers are not going to outscore all of the 4.5 to 5.5 million goalkeepers. In fact, they rarely do, you know, because they pretty much only get clean sheets. They don't make many saves, etc, etc. So don't worry about the 6 million goalkeepers. Mendy, Edison, Alisson, forget them completely. We're going to find some more high-scoring goalkeepers that are not those premium guys. So think Sanchez for a 4.5. Think like a player like Melier for a 5 million. And if you really want to go 5.5, then I would make that Martinez. But those three I just mentioned are my favourite keepers. I would go for one of them personally. So we've got one defensive slot left, and we can actually be a little bit more flexible here. I've seen a lot of people do very different things, and I don't think there's one right price to have for a defender. So I've put on here 4.5 to 7 million defender here. So anyway, from a 4.5 million defender that you can rotate with your other 4.5 million defender who's on your bench, or you could go really expensive. You could go for a Robertson if you really want to and put more money into your defense. You can go for a Lugadinha if you fancy that, someone like that. If you want to go just above the 4.5 million mark, maybe Sofao at 5 million, that could work as well. And then we'll move into midfield. The first midfielder I'm going to put next to Salah is your second premium midfielder. So as well as Salah, we're going to have one other premium midfielder, and I've put the price range as 8 million to 12 million. So it really could be anyone from, you know, a Kai Havertz. If you fancy a Kai Havertz, you go for a Mahrez, you can go for a Son, or you could go for one of the more expensive guys, maybe a KDB or a Bruno Fernandes, if that's what you want to do. If you are of the opinion that Bruno Fernandes is one of those essential players, then this is the slot that you put him in. If you don't really fancy Bruno, you still, in my opinion, do need to go for a slightly more expensive player here. So maybe a Son, you know, even though Son is not quite at the 12 million mark, you do feel like you could potentially make a couple of transfers and bring in one of those 12 million players. If you absolutely had to, you could do that in 2 transfers, couldn't you? Take a Son up to a KDB or a Bruno if those guys did pop off. So our next midfielders, we've got a 6.5 to 8.5 million midfielder. So depending on how much money you spent on the first one, that could kind of restrict you on how much you can spend on the second one. But at base level, you do want to go for at least a 6.5 million midfielder, as in, you know, a Bowen, a Buendia, a Rafinha, someone like that. Bailey, if you fancy that, the new signing for Aston Villa, if you fancy go on that one, why not? Why not? But we can also go a little bit more expensive here. If you do have the spare cash, you could go to a Havertz or a Mount or someone like that. If you do like the look of someone, Greenwood, for example, you do like the look of them, then yeah, you might have a little bit more money to play around with here. You could even potentially push this up to a 9 million, like a Mahrez or a Sancho or someone like that, depending on how much you spent on that other premium midfielder. And then finally, we want one more cheap midfielder, and I've put this at 6 million to 6.5 million. I wouldn't really want to spend too much less than that, but at the same time, I don't think you're going to have an opportunity to spend much more than that. So if you want to go for a 6 million, you've got Sarr there, obviously. 6.5 is probably the price you're more likely to be looking at here. You know, one of Rafinha, Bowen, Buendia, those are kind of the big guys in the 6.5 million bracket, aren't they? But there are a few options in this position, but not a huge amount. So it is slightly limiting, but that's kind of why we're doing this structure here, so we can make a nice team. And that way, we've got our premium midfielder in Salah. We've got a second premium midfielder there who we could potentially transfer out if should we need to. If we fancied a different premium midfielder, say we start with Son, but we want to switch to a Mahrez, or we want to switch to a Sancho, for example. If we've had a couple of weeks to have a look at Sancho, you've got a really easy transfer to make there. Son to Sancho. Love it. Absolutely easy job there. And then in the next positions, we can rotate between those slightly cheaper midfielders as well. Say, Emil Smith-Rowe emerges as a really good option. You can swap your cheap midfielder down to Emil Smith-Rowe, etc., etc. And you've got a really nice structure there where you can do pretty much whatever you want with that midfield. Easy transfers in and out. So let's move to our forwards here as well. We have got 3 slots. So our first forward, I would go for someone between the price of 7.5 and 8 million. I really wouldn't look to go too much higher than that. There's not really any really expensive forwards that I like the look of too much, other than Kane, who we don't expect to play in game week 1 anyway, which means there's kind of no one. You don't really want to go for Werner, you don't really want to go for Firmino, you don't really want to go for Gabriel Jesus. So really at 8.5, we have Cavani, and other than that, who else are we going to go for? Well, it's the 8 million and the 7.5 million forwards, of which there are many. So you've got Bamford, you've got DCL, you've got Danny Ings now that he's moved to Aston Villa, which is going to be huge, by the way. Could be quite interesting. I'm not sure I'd want to go for Ings immediately. I'm not sure if he will play the first match or not. I would imagine that he probably would, but maybe a little bit too risky for me. We can also go down here to players like Wilson or Antonio, but there are also a few more slots where we could also go for players like that. So yeah, have a think of what forwards you want. The next forward slot, I put a 7 million to 8 million. So obviously you can't have two 8.5 million. So if you are going to go for the 8.5 million Cavani, who is really the only 8.5 million forwards to go for, then this guy has to be 7 million to 8 million. And really, there's not too much at 7 million to start off the season, but I have put 7 million to 8 million anyway. But really here, again, we can go for a Bamford, DCL, Antonio, Wilson, someone like that. Watkins is probably not going to be as favoured now as a fantasy pick anyway, because I would say that he's probably going to be playing on the left wing now, which does kind of put me off him a little bit. Obviously, there are a few wingers at Aston Villa that could potentially rotate with him a little bit. And is he going to be as dangerous from the left wing? Probably not as dangerous as he is going through the middle. So Watkins is probably off the cards now, but there's still a few really nice options here, like I keep mentioning. And finally, we've got a 6.5 to 7.5 million slot. So this one goes down to 6.5 million. So this is where you could enter kind of a Tony. So if you want to go for a 6.5 million Ivan Tony, maybe you're struggling for budget, you've spent a lot of money on the other positions that we've come up so far, a really good way to go for a really cheap and nice forward is to go for the 6.5 of Tony. And once you've done that, you will see that you can spend a little bit more money elsewhere. You can get your Robertsons, your Digne, you can spend a little bit more money in midfield, etc, etc. But there are still obviously options if you want to go for 3 more expensive forwards. If you like Cavani and DCL and Bamford, and you like Wilson and you like Antonio, and you really can't decide, just go for all expensive forwards. I don't think there's too much wrong with that. I would maybe have one slightly cheaper forward. I wouldn't go 8.5, 8, 8, for example. I would much rather go 8.5, 7.5, maybe 6.5, because again, it's spreading it out a little bit. You're playing different price points. You've got different players at different prices, which means easy switches, loads of easy switches there. But there's an argument to say, you could go for an 8.5 to 7.5s, for example, and that would be fine too, because you can always transfer a 7.5 down to a Tony, say he came into form, or a Chris Wood came into form. You can transfer down to someone like that if you wanted to. But I would make sure that you do leave your options open. So if there were 7.5, 8 million forwards that became available, make sure you have one, at least one maybe, at 8.5, so you can transfer in Bamford or DCL at a later date if they do pop up off, transfer Ings in a couple of weeks. If it goes really well at Aston Villa, you're ready to get him in immediately. You are prepared for that. And there we have it, basically, guys. Obviously, you've got your captain's armband on Salah. We'll probably put our vice captain on the second premium midfielder just for fun right now. Obviously, I don't know who these players are actually going to be in your teams, but this is how I would structure any team. This is how I've structured my team. This is how I've seen most pro teams structured in this exact way, in the 3-4-3 formation. Obviously, if you're in a 4-4-2 formation or something like that, your team's probably going to look a little bit different. I would suggest that 3-4-3 is my favourite formation. It's probably going to be the best formation. 4-4-2 is also a pretty viable formation as well, but I don't think I would go much further than that. So make sure your team is in a 3-4-3 or a 4-4-2. But there you go. That is how you structure it. So I guess look at this in one hand. On the other hand, start picking your team. Make sure each of your players that you're picking fits in the price brackets that I've put on screen, and you will have a really, really nice structure that is really flexible going into future game weeks as well. So hopefully that's going to be really, really useful for you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please leave a like. If you really enjoyed this video and you want to stick around for more fantasy content and you want to try and get ahead of your mates by getting these fantasy tips and stuff like that, please do subscribe and put notifications on as well, and make sure you don't miss a thing, because there's so much more to come on this channel. But thanks again, once again, for watching. If you want to join the mini league, there is a link in the description. If you want to follow me on Twitter, link in the description. Instagram there as well if you fancy that. But aside from that, guys, thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you later, mates. Bye-bye.